was actually really good. So.
It was.
All right, let's light this candle.
Hasn't changed yet.
7:30. The music performance. I was so hungry, I didn't eat dinner. I was sitting there with the music.
You know what I mean? But we should
All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Bridgewater Town Council to order. Could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to have a brief moment of silence in recognition of those and veterans who have passed. Thank you. A Happy New Year to everybody.
President, could I make a motion to take item J out of order?
Not yet,
All right. Trying to move us along here.
Jay. Just wanted to remind everybody that this meeting is being televised and aired live. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of our minutes from our previous meeting.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second to approve our minutes from our previous meeting. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes from our previous meeting have been passed. Announcements from the president. I have a couple of announcements this evening. I first want to start out by saying that the first thing I'm going to be reading tonight is just a reminder to all of us that, you know, there's a lot going on in the world today, and there's a lot that has happened in the past few weeks in this country, particularly over the holidays, and there's certainly a lot that's happening around the world, even as recently as within the last 30 minutes. And as we enter 2020 with what certainly will be a spirited and long year, particularly in our own country, it's important to remember that we live in a small community, although we all belong to a very large country, and that we need to respect everybody, no matter what their beliefs and feelings are. So we all need to debate the issues, but be respectful to each other. So as has been read in the past, it's always good to start off the year by reading this resolution. And the town of Bridgewater presents the proclamation in support of the Bridgewater Citizens for Civility and Respect, whereas Bridgewater, established in 1656, is a town with a diverse population of over 27,000 people that has enjoyed a strong tradition of civil rights in which hate speech is not tolerated. Whereas the citizens of Bridgewater have long upheld a tradition of respect which guarantees civil rights for all. Whereas incidents of hate speech and verbal assaults directed at individuals because of their appearance or clothing choice, which reflects particular cultures, is in direct opposition with the traditions and values of this town. Whereas the town of Bridgewater respects the rights of all persons in our town to live without fear of verbal or physical assault and exercise freedom of cultural expression through choice of attire, religious practice, and speech. Be it therefore resolved that the town of Bridgewater, Massachusetts is declared a community of civility where intolerant speech and behavior are unacceptable, thus ensuring that our town remains a respectful place to live, work, attend school, and conduct business. The second announcement I would like to make is that 3 weeks ago, we now have a vacancy in the District 6 Council district here in Bridgewater. I am going to be following the same process that we went through a few years ago when Dr. Kevin Perry resigned and we sought applications, which is where current Councilor Fred Chase was appointed. So there was a resolution, an ordinance, I should say, an ordinance adopted by the council, sponsored by Councilor Fitzgibbons back in 2013, that kind of led the protocol of how we should go about filling a vacancy. So tonight, I am announcing that there is a vacancy in District 6, and I am requesting that any qualified resident that lives in District 6 that's an eligible voter to submit their name to our council clerk within the next 3 weeks, within 21 days. And from that point on, our first meeting in February, which is February 4th, we will review those applicants and perhaps call them in and interview them and then make an appointment until the next election. That is the intent of what we intend to do on the council. So tonight, I am announcing the vacancy, and anyone in the community who lives in District 6 as a registered voter, please submit your name of interest if you're willing to step up to the plate, serve the community as an appointed counselor until the next election. And with the resignation of Counselor Wood, I'll reach out to my colleagues on the council. We now have 2 vacancies, one on the Rules and Procedures Committee and one on the Budget and Finance Committee. So I will just leave that out there and perhaps reach out to anybody that's looking to switch committees or would like to learn more about either one of them within the next 3 or 4 months. Just contact me and we'll talk about that at a future meeting. We do not have any proclamations this evening. Citizens Open Forum. Are there any citizens here tonight that wish to speak during the Citizens Open Forum portion of our meeting?
Hi, Bill Wood, 388 Hayward Street, Bridgewater. I wanted to give you an update on what's been happening since the last time I saw everybody. The town manager has appointed me to FinCom to help with the budget season. And for anyone in District 6 trying to reach me around town, my new email is wdwfincom@gmail.com. Until recently, I was constrained from talking about a lot of topics about downtown because of the proximity of my grandparents' house, which my mother owned. I could not talk about the deplorable condition of the fire station. I could not talk about the empty town hall. And I could not talk about the traffic patterns on the southern end of the common. The house has been sold, and now I can freely talk about all of downtown, which leads me to my next topic. Early in the council years, I formed a bylaw review team to advise me on the council. This was done in advance of the administrative code work, so we could have a strategy about what to include, exclude, and update as we pulled the bylaws into the code of ordinances. More than 5 years ago, the Community Development Master Plan for downtown was published, which is this, which is commonly referred to as the revitalization plan. But it has since been largely ignored. So tonight, I'm announcing that I'm building a leadership team to work on the Central Business District Revitalization Project. This spring, most of the Central Business District is within District 6, and this spring, the leadership team will begin to recommend viable change and transformation to define the signature of Bridgewater, our downtown business area. Anyone who wishes to join the Central Business District leadership team should contact me at wdwfincom@gmail.com. Thank you.
Are there any other citizens here that wish to speak during the Citizens Open Forum portion of our meeting? Anybody at all? Sir, if you could just please come up to the podium and speak into it.
Good evening, John Donna, 261 South Street. I just wanted to, I was at the most recent hearing for the zoning redistricting, and I just wanted to ask the council if there were any updates on that. Those councils that are involved, they could provide any updates on where we are with that, and any big changes that might be coming about because of the rezoning, please.
Those will be agenda items going forward, but there is nothing to report on this evening. Any other citizens wish to speak during the Citizens Open Forum portion of our meeting? Anybody at all? Okay,
Mr. President, I'd like to take item J out of order.
There's a motion to take item J out of order. Is there a second? There's a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of taking item J out of order, say aye. Aye. Okay, we are now under discussion items A, the joint meeting with the town manager, the finance committee, and the school committee chair or their designee. It's great to see everybody here this evening to do our annual joint meeting. I'll turn this over to the town manager who kind of set this thing up to get us going on what will predominantly be a budget discussion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think as everybody knows, this is generally the meeting that we hold at our first meeting or second meeting in January or at the latest early February. So it's dictated by charter. So the charter calls for the town manager, the council, the school district, and the FinCom to get together and have essentially a general discussion about the actually, the charter doesn't really spell it out very carefully, but have a general discussion about the upcoming budget, which is fiscal year 2021. And so I certainly appreciate the FinCom coming. I think for the first time in quite a while, we have a quorum of the FinCom attending this meeting and also great representation from the school district. So I appreciate Superintendent Swenson and the school board members and Kathy coming over to meet with us. So I know it's another night out, and everybody loves another night out, especially when it's in this building. So I think just in order to sort of kick it off, I'll just give you some initial thoughts. As I say, it's far too early in the budget process to really talk about numbers, but I can give generalities which hopefully will point the discussion in a useful and productive way. Internally, again, this year we're striving to come up with a practical, balanced budget that aligns with the budget guidelines that the council will give us, and also aligns with the budget policy guidelines that we live under internally. And I can tell you that while the budget responsibility rests with me, it's certainly a productive and effective budget doesn't come without the interaction with budget and finance, the finance committee, the school district, and folks, and certainly our dedicated department heads. So all of that plays a role in getting to what's essentially a policy document about that guides Bridgewater for the upcoming fiscal year. Every year we now focus on delivering a sustainable budget. That's a key word internally for us. We now do very healthy and robust 5-year projections, which helps us to determine whether something is truly going to be sustainable. As we're looking forward, I can tell you that loosely our budget objectives for 2021 are not radically different than they have been in the past. We're going to support and promote economic activity in town, fund current services in a sustainable way, transition to a true DPW, which is something that hasn't been really on the list in the last few years. We'll continue to fill sizable service gaps, both internally and externally. Where we can, we're going to meet our reserve objectives to ensure that we've got capital funding in both the next fiscal year and the fiscal year after that. And we're also going to keep pace on our stabilization accounts. I happily can report that our stabilization counts are at good, healthy levels. We're just going to try to maintain, the incremental increases there. And honestly, finally, this year, very excited to be partnering with the school district to build a quality elementary school and make sure that we have the teachers and staff to support that mission. In terms of revenue projections, we have developed a better program and a better process to watch local revenues very closely. Obviously, the revenues that we secure are the expenses that we can expend, the monies that we can expend. So we have to be very careful about accurate projections on revenue. We've seen some leveling off in terms of local revenue lately, and in some cases a bit of a drop. over last year, and nothing that we need to be alarmed about at this point, but it's certainly something that we're keeping an eye on for fiscal '21. But in addition, we look at national, statewide, and local trends to help inform where our revenues are going to be and how that's going to impact our proposed expenditures. We also look at new growth, and for those that don't know, new growth is essentially the additional tax that is generated by new building or renovations or improvements on property. We carefully look at where that new growth is coming from, whether it's coming from residential, commercial, or industrial projects. And we also listen very carefully to the governor's projections for local aid increases and what the state is projecting for state-level revenue increases. Excuse me. We've certainly all of that comes from a finance department that is, or I should say, a finance team that we have built over the years and invested in, and we've seen some enormous benefits there. We wouldn't be having the conversations now about potential future revenue and expense issues unless we had the quality of finance team that we do have. We have far better revenue projection capabilities, far better expense projection capabilities, better debt projections, better capital plans, and certainly better techniques at our disposal to carry out townwide goals. So I do want to take the opportunity to thank Tony and Lori Guarini and the whole team for putting in a lot of work, not just during budget season, but really year-round. You're welcome. Finally, I would like to extend my appreciation to the school board members, Superintendent Swenson, honestly, for the work that they do year-round. It's easy to say, oh, it's 180 days a year, but really we all know that it's 365 days a year that the work goes on.
366 this year.
Thank you, Councilor Gibbons. I know this past summer, I was not at them, but I know this past summer there were 3 sessions with school board members and the superintendent and other folks, which were really very helpful for us to better understand the budget, how the budget, your budget's put together, the capital needs, and how that all works. And I think, honestly, those meetings, even though they weren't really attended by the public, dovetailed really well with our internal goal of making every component of Bridgewater's Bridgewater finances as open and transparent as possible. I tell people, someday they'll start to believe me, but I tell people we're an open book. We'll show you whatever you want to see, whenever you want to see it, and that's the objective, essentially. We certainly look forward to working with the district on capital needs. Obviously, the new school is a big capital chunk for us, but we'll continue to work with the district on capital needs and prioritizing what's contained in the budget versus what other capital funds the district needs from the town. So I do hope that we can continue. I think Councilor George had mentioned in years past that a meeting perhaps with the district and the council and Rainham would go a long way at times to really bridge some of the communication gaps that exist. Because I know as a town, we often put the district in a position of bridging the communication gap there when it really would be helpful to get everybody in the same room at times. So I guess I'll leave the room with a really ambivalent statement. While it's too early to make really precise revenue projections, and Tony can tell me if I'm completely off base, we're not anticipating any dramatic increase, but nor are we anticipating a substantial decrease in revenue. So we'll definitely see a slowdown in our revenue growth. And economic indicators are really telling us that things will be relatively flat. But with that riveting piece of information, certainly we're all here to answer questions that anybody has, but certainly appreciate the opportunity and appreciate the attendance, so I think this is a great start.
Can I just open the meeting for the school committee?
Oh, sure, go right ahead, yeah.
We do have a quorum, although we don't anticipate voting on anything. So just to open the meeting of the Bridgewater Rainham Regional School Committee at 7:50 PM.
Okay.
Thank you.
Having said that, do you want to give a, I'm sorry,
Mr. President, we'll open our meeting of the FinCom.
you're open too?
Also, we
You
have
the
a
chair?
quorum, so-
You the chairman now, too, Bill?
Does anybody object if
Wow.
I be chairman today? Okay, then I guess.
Anyway, so we're all open now, okay, so, thank you. I'll turn it over to the school committee if they have any opening comments to make
Sure,
as far
and
as the
I'll turn-
budget.
I'll turn it over to Mr. Swenson.
Thank you. Trickles down. So I just wanted to, first of all, thank everybody for this opportunity. President Gallagher, members of the council, Mr. Dutton, for allowing us to be here this evening. We have indeed begun our budget season. Actually, believe it or not, begins about a month into our actual fiscal year that we're currently in. So back in October, we began to meet with our principals, our department heads, and we asked them to schedule meetings with us and bring with them any type of staffing requests or needs, and also working with some more of our central administration. We talk about any type of curriculum changes and needs that we might be bringing into the district based upon outdated curriculum or maybe some initiatives that are coming down from the state. Right around the end of November, we finished those meetings. I've been working with Kathy Macedo very closely. She is the money lady, and she does an outstanding job each and every year of taking all of that information, which is a lot of information, to put together and create a pseudo line item budget that then I will present as our student success plan budget, first at our financial subcommittee meeting next Tuesday, which we encourage folks to attend if you can, at 5:30. It is at the central office conference room. After that, I will be actually presenting my preliminary budget on January 22nd, and that is at 7 o'clock at the Rainham Middle School in the library. At that point, after presenting my preliminary budget, it's then up to the school committee to vote whether or not to accept it. If they accept the budget, it then becomes their budget, and that's when the real work begins, because we're going to have to work together collectively through a number of subcommittee meetings to start to really get to a number that obviously is fiscally responsible but still services the needs of our students and staff. We will have open dialogue, obviously, with hopefully FinCom on both sides of the district, and Mr. Dutton and the new town administrator in Rainham, Mr. Waters, throughout that process. So again, that it is a transparent process, and we all have an idea of where we are in terms of what our needs are and funding available. Obviously, too, we depend upon state aid. That really, truly comes from what we get in terms of a number from the governor's budget, which will come out in a few weeks. The Student Opportunity Act, I'm not sure if many folks are aware of that, was passed. Governor Baker's bill was passed in November. That, we're hoping, may bring some additional revenues from the state level. Reading a little deeper into that bill, though, it really focuses on bridging the gaps for districts that from more of an urban or rural environments that are underperforming, especially in the areas of special education and English language learners. So they are requiring that a plan is put together and submitted to the state to, how you would actually utilize those additional funds in those areas. So we've been working with our Assistant Superintendent, Ryan Powers, and our new Coordinator of Teaching and Learning, Christine Richards, for the last few weeks, and starting to kind of put that plan together. As Kathy will tell you, though, she is extremely conservative, which I appreciate, and usually that number that is given to us through the governor's budget is really the one that we truly stick to throughout the process, because it is a situation where we would never want to have to go back if we were to go above what the projected amount is for Chapter 70 or 71 for our transportation from the governor. So we really stick to that number throughout that process, and if it does become a situation where that number's increased a little bit, we're able to, get a little bit of a bump, that's great, and we can utilize those funds or certify it to our E&D the following year. So with that, that's where we currently are with the budget. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions with it, but again, we do have a meeting of the subcommittee next Tuesday where we'll really get into the nuts and bolts of what the FY21 budget is looking like moving forward.
Thank you. I'll refer, does the Finance Committee have any opening comments to make
Sure.
before I go to questions? Go ahead.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
I am the newest member of the FinCom committee here. But I'm not inexperienced. I've been chair of the Budget and Finance Committee on the council. I had been chair for a long time. And there's a number of things that always concern us during the budget season, and there's a process that we all go through during the budget season. One of the things that I asked Josh to add to the agenda for next week, because we'll have a meeting on Monday, is a discussion of the year-end financials, including a study of the revenue, a look at the December revenue figures, and a look at, I forgot what the third item was, but the overall process. And so it's key to understand the revenue side of items. So I'm hoping that the council at some point finishes up the resolution. That was an unfinished item I'd left behind. The FinCom also has a subcommittee members. I know Kathy's on it. I think Julie's on it. And they are on it, and they're meeting with the Budget and Finance Subcommittee, talking about things like the percentage that we would target for capital stabilization, that sort of thing. I just want to say, before I hand it over to anybody else here, so every time I opened the Budget and Finance Committee, the first meeting on the budget, I looked at three different things. One is public safety. Because in the town here, when we talk about public safety, we don't talk about, we have to gear the budget toward the number of people that are in the fire department and police department, but we need to look at public safety in terms of minutes, because it's really minutes that count. And we have cross town, it's like 4.5 miles or so. So I always said in those meetings that we should try an objective of 4.5-minute response time, and then try to figure out the personnel and equipment around that response time, because longer than that is too long, and shorter than that probably isn't efficient. But the other two important aspects are that we need to try to do this with no layoffs and no operational override if we can. And those are two clear objectives, and that's the basis of the budget resolution, is to decide exactly how much money is going to be in the pot of available resources that the town manager and the finance department can use each year. And some of the challenges, as Mr. Swenson said, Superintendent Swenson said, is we don't often know what the governor's budget's going to be. We don't often know exactly how many kids are going to some of the other schools that are also covered in our budget. And we also don't often know exactly what our numbers like growth are going to be in the budget. So those are huge challenges. And so we're often making forecasts 18 months in advance of when the final numbers come out. And that's a big challenge. Sometimes it's an art more than a science, but that's my approach. Anyone else? Thank you.
Any counselors have any questions for the town manager, the school department, or the finance committee? Anybody at all? Mr. Fitzgibbons?
I'd just like to ask the superintendent, because I used to sit on the school committee and I know what this means. If the state decides that they're going to level fund you as far as what, Chapter 70, 71, et cetera goes, even if you only increase your spending by 2.5%, let's say, that really translates to a much bigger increase in an assessment to each member town, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we put that out there so that, you know, the town's assessment is kind of at the mercy of the state, is the point I
true.
want to make.
And I think that in a couple of weeks, and I'll be attending with a few other colleagues the MMA conference up in Boston. I think the governor will be speaking to the municipal officials that are there that Saturday morning, but I think his House 1 budget will be out a couple of days before then, so we'll get a tone or a sense of where he's coming from as far as state revenue. So I just have one question for Superintendent. The supplemental bill that was passed in November, I believe was about 1.5
$1
billion.
Yeah, correct.
How, and I understand the needs in the urban school system. I understand that, but none of that was really geared towards overall districts. And did you fare any sort of financial help with that bill?
Well,
You don't know yet.
We won't know yet.
We don't know yet,
We won't
okay.
know yet. It's geared, it's the Student Opportunity Act. It's
what it's
supposed to be
called.
geared for
Yeah.
all students.
Right.
But as I kind of read a little bit into kind of the details of it, and just knowing the populations, which I totally agree, are the biggest cost drivers in most districts, which are special education, and now our ever-growing English language learners students. A lot of those communities that have those higher populations of those students, I feel, will probably be served a little bit greater than those who have lower numbers in those areas. For instance, our English language learner population has grown exponentially since I've been here in 10 years. When I first came in, I believe the district level, we had about 40 students. We're close to about 100 now. But still, we're considered a low incident district when in those concerns compared to some of our urban neighbors like Brockton or Fall River, New Bedford. So a lot of those funds, I feel, I'm sure will hopefully benefit from that. We are going to obviously put our plan together of if we are to receive some of those additional funds, how we will utilize that. But I would say that, again, we're going to go with what, and Kathy always does, with what that number comes from Governor Baker, kind of stick as close to that as possible. And then, down the line, if more funding becomes available from the state level, that's a bonus for us. But we would never want to take a step back and have to reduce or have to, come back to the town and, ask for an increased assessment, local assessment, as we get deeper into this process.
I also know that there's been a lot of advocacy on Beacon Hill for funding transportation. And hopefully we'll see how strong that advocacy has been when he comes out with House 1 in a few weeks, because it's important. I think it's important to you, particularly in a regional district like
So
us.
from a regional perspective, so one of the biggest incentives to regionalize back in the 80s and 90s was that the state was going to take care of 100% of all transportation costs, with the caveat, should funding be available. So really, truly, it's never been that 100%. We're, teetering in the 70% tile. So that additional 30%, if that was ever there, would be a tremendous boost, at the state level, which then, again, would reduce some of the burden with the local town assessments.
Any other questions from any colleagues? Mr. Skimmons?
Just to the town manager, picking up on a comment you made earlier about, our books are open, you can come in and look at them whenever you want. Do you carry this attitude over into negotiations with unions and say, this is what we can afford to give you, and here's what our finance team is projecting we have, and here's how much we think is a fair contract for you?
Yes, we actually start every union negotiation with sometimes one, sometimes several sessions on exactly where we see the next 5 years headed, and where we see health insurance costs going, where we see step increases going where we see, possible COLAs. So yes.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Just want to know, what time is the school committee meeting in Rainham?
7 o'clock.
7?
Okay, I think you appreciate you all coming in, and we'll have a lot more discussions coming down the road, I'm sure, but this is where it all starts, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity. Thank you.
Would you have to close your meetings?
Thanks for coming, Jeff.
Motion to adjourn at...
It's up to them.
Just saying, you have to close your meetings.
Phil, close your meeting.
Any opposed? Doing it now.
Bill, close your meeting.
Sure, taking notes, right? Taking notes?
Yeah.
I don't have to take notes.
Why don't we take a 2-minute recess while the room clears?
Thanks
2
for
minutes,
coming.
please. 2 minutes.
2 minutes, great, actually, perfect.
You know off the top of your head the name of the hotel?
As soon as they show up, they're having a dialogue.
Does it record as long as there's motion? Sheraton,
I
Boston?
think so, because, they just stopped and talked, and then
You have 10 a.m. on the 15th?
Maybe. Maybe not. Really? Yeah.
Probably a limited number. Yeah, so many channels you can get on, yeah.
Share frequency with someone.
Your crossing's not right there.
But I told her to do it on.
You know, anybody with
Thanks. All set.
Before our last budget, we're clamoring for
Awesome, yes.
Frank,
Right.
you ready?
investment counselors.
I'll finish this
Frank?
and get them.
Just kind of wanted to bring that up. And
Frank, you ready?
when they brought it up was
Peter?
investment.
Peter, you ready?
You'll pay less in special ed.
Frank, you ready?
We're ready.
You ready?
You are.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting back to order of the Bridgewater Town Council. Moving on to item E, appointments, we do not have any. Hearings, we do not have any this evening. License transactions. Under item G, we have 2020 annual license renewals. A, we have one, a petition P 2020-001, annual renewal of the taxi cab license, A&A Metro Transportation doing business as Bill's Taxi.
Motion to approve?
Second.
It's a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The license has been renewed. Petition, item 2, petition P 2020-002, annual renewal of Skips Liquors. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve for discussion.
I'll second it.
The motion has been made to approve for discussion and second. I'll refer to Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I'd like to hear from the town manager. I believe that there were several building occupancy issues that had not been addressed prior to the beginning of the year. Have they been addressed yet?
They have been addressed. The petitioner in this case has dropped off, and staff has approved his as-built drawings of the construction that took place on the property, so we are satisfied with that. He still needs an inspection from the building office. Building official is on vacation this week, so that will happen as soon as building official returns, so we will hold that license until such time as it's been approved.
So to the extent that the license is being held, should business be being conducted there?
That's a great question. Because the applicant would be technically appealing his lack of renewal, then he is allowed to conduct business until such time.
Stop, please. I was told that we could do this and the business would stop. That was the differing condition when we did the whole group renewal. That makes no sense to me.
No, I think what I said at the group renewal was that if we still had problems with the license, we could have a license revocation hearing, which is the only way the ABCC will actually revoke the license.
Then we should have just granted it when it came in and not be doing it again. That's my point.
Any other discussion? Mr. Columbotus.
I'm kind of unclear as to what sort of holds are on the occupancy for that building, for that establishment. So the as-built basically is our plans saying this is exactly how we built it, right?
Correct.
But one problem with that, the construction of the project, is that I believe no one from town signed off on the drainage before it was covered back up with dirt, right? No staff member of the town verified that pipe was laid in the ground the right way. Is that right?
That's correct. There was, in fact, no drainage in the ground, and there was no drainage required in the ground by the planning board when they approved the initial site plan. So when the petitioner paved over the area that it was not intended to be paved over originally, and claimed that there was drainage underneath that, then the building office said, wait a minute, we need to see proof that there's drainage under that because you've paved over it and now you've made impervious surface, which obviously can't drain. So the applicant tore up. The reason there's now an as-built and a certified as-built and an as-built that's been approved by the town engineers because the pavement was taken up and the as-built does reflect what was actually approved by the planning board, which did not include subsurface drainage.
Okay, I'm confused. I've had discussions with the chair of the planning board who insists that there was drainage required in the plan. So I guess I'm wondering, my primary question would be, can this be tabled? I mean, I'm frankly uncomfortable, approving this application without clarity as to what's holding it up.
I guess what I'd like to ask the town manager is are you comfortable enough with what has transpired these last 3 weeks with us approving the license, subject to the planning board doing their final their inspection when they get back? You and your staff comfortable with us approving that for him to be open for business?
We are comfortable with the approval of the license, correct?
Okay. Mr. Fitzgibbons.
This goes back to my earlier point. It makes no difference. He's operating. He's appealing, apparently, the denial of the license, and now we're approving it, but we're holding it, which can still be appealed. So let's just vote, say yes, hold the license, and make sure that everything is up to standards and snuff. And I mean, this has been an ongoing problem, which is very unfortunate. And I just would like to see it taken care of once and for all.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, there is a motion and there's a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, it's 8-1, the license has been granted.
7.
I'm sorry, 7. Oh, that's right. We're missing one. 7-1 approval. Okay, moving on. Item H, presentations. We have a presentation tonight from the Bridgewater Citizens for Civility and Respect with an update, and I'll recognize Mr. Ray Ajamian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I serve on the planning board, but I'm here as a member of the Bridgewater Citizens for Civility and Respect, as we call ourselves BCCR. And I also want to thank the chair for reading the proclamation. I think the proclamation is a great example of how people in a community can work together. That proclamation was written by members of the BCCR. We went to town manager, who was very cooperative with us. We came to you with the proclamation. You took the proclamation and you reworded it and made it better. And then on top of that, we asked that it be displayed somewhere, and it was, and the college stepped in and did the framing and everything. It's just, I regard that as just a wonderful way that people in the community work together. And that proclamation is now in this building, and I think it looks wonderful. I hope people look at it. BCCR came about almost 4 years ago because of 2 hate instances, one at the Bridgewater Post Office and one at Trukey's in West Bridgewater. And people came together, and we decided that something should be done. And some of us have some feelings about how other people are treated. For instance, I myself am Armenian. Both my parents are immigrants. One, my mother, lost part of her family in the genocide of 1915. So I and others are very much aware of how people are treated. And so we came together and we formed our group, and we want to give you an update of how we have done things over the last 4 years. We realize that over the last 4 years, in terms of how minorities are treated in this country, at least in my opinion, things have gotten worse, considerably worse. I just read today that yesterday a student from Saudi Arabia, a woman, was attacked by another woman because she's wearing a hijab, and she was the woman actually tried to strangle her. That's just unacceptable. We can't fix the nation, but we can at least look at our own community. And you have to understand that things are not good. If you look at the Southern Poverty Law Center, there are 14 hate groups in the state of Massachusetts. They range from anti-Muslim, neo-Nazi, black nationalist, anti-LGBT, white nationalist, and just general hate. So all we can do is focus on Bridgewater and try to make Bridgewater a better place. So what we'd like to do, just briefly, is give you an example of some idea of what we have been doing over the last 4 years. And I'd like 3 other people to speak on that. And first will be Sam Baumgarten.
Thank you. Hi, folks. Happy New Year. One of the roles that I took on a couple of years ago was to organize forums in town. And the purpose of the forums was to present topics that might be challenging, difficult, contentious, and demonstrate that we could talk about them in civil, respectful manner. So we've had 6 forums since a year ago, September, and I just wanted to review the topics briefly. We started with what we called Crossing the Aisle, and we had Senator Pacheco and Representative D'Amelia in the same room, and talking about how they work together at the State House. And it turns out that they do work together a lot, even though politically they may be far apart. We followed that up with one on gun safety, which was a bit contentious at times. We had the police chief, and we had a member of Moms Demand Actions for Gun Sense, and we had a professor from the university, and there was some good debate there about gun control. We followed that up with a forum we called How International Students and Faculty Are Treated in Town, and we had members from, or presenters from different countries and backgrounds to share some of the milieu of the university and the town and how they were treated and accepted or not accepted, as the case may be. And then they finished up last year with white nationalism, which of course is another hot topic. And as you know, we recently had the posters put up by the Patriot Front in the area towns, so we know there are white nationalist groups around the area. This fall, we started out with a forum on immigration, which was probably the most contentious because we had people with very differing views. And by the way, I've been the moderator of those forums, and that was the one where I had to exercise my moderator skills to a great extent. And then we've just had one on elections 2020 with Professor Mike Krasanik from the university presenting topics that will come up, and we had varying views about health and Medicare and so on. We have another forum scheduled in February, which I think will be one of the most interesting, and it's dealing with structural or embedded racism. We have a guest speaker from Plymouth State University coming, who's going to talk about structural racism and particularly its effects on schooling. And we're holding that at the Moakley Center because we're hoping to get a big crowd to face the issue of racism, which, as we know, exists deep under the surface, and we really need to find a way to attack it. So, and then the last one this year will be on LGBTQ rights. I'm glad to say that most of the forums have been conducted respectfully, and again, I make sure that people follow rules such as no calling out, no hooting. We try to limit applause, and we just have people encouraged to listen. So that's been a major focus of ours, to demonstrate that we can talk about difficult topics in respectful, civil ways. And before I leave the floor and turn it over to another member, I just wanted to share with you why we do what we do and why you do what you do. There was an article in the Globe Sunday called Exercising the Body Politic. And it was sort of a bit of a takeoff on the New Year's resolution to exercise. But the writer was saying we need to exercise our involvement in the community. And one of the concluding paragraphs was, so this year, this New Year's, let's set aside despair and resolve to strengthen our body politic. Show up, join a campaign, hold a sign, raise your voice, be a poll watcher, write a letter to the editor, make a phone call, tweet, and above all else, vote. So I think that's what you do as a council. That's what we do as citizens. We feel it's important to stand up for civility and respect, and we do it in these different ways. And Beryl's going to talk a little bit about our bystander training.
Good evening, councilors, and thank you very much for this time that you've given us to speak about Bridgewater Citizens for Civility and Respect. My name is Beryl Domingo. I live at 36 Saddle Drive, Bridgewater, and I'm here to talk about the Training Active Bystanders program. I'm a resident of Bridgewater and a naturalized citizen. I'm very proud to be an immigrant. I've chosen this country to be my country, United States of America to be my country. And as an immigrant and a person of color, I'm very aware of attitudes toward people who look different. So I have a special sensitivity to how others like me are treated in our community. So when I heard of these incidents that my two previous speakers referenced that happened in our town and our neighboring town, it really bothered me that there were people who felt that way about others and expressed hate towards people just based on their appearance and what they were wearing. And I felt that as a member of BCCR, that we need to do something. And since I love living in Bridgewater, I've been living here for over 30 years, and I wouldn't want to see our town sort of have this type of behavior become a normal around our area. So I found out about the Training Active Bystanders through reading an article in the Globe a few years back, and it seemed so simple and straightforward a way to do something when you see something. It seemed almost too simple when I read it, but I thought, hey, it's worth exploring. So we contacted the organization that developed a curriculum to train community people about how to be an active bystander, how to intervene in a situation when you see something inappropriate, hateful, unjust being performed, and that you can do it in very simple ways. You can do it in very ways that does not exaggerate or make the situation worse. This training is a training that helps community members recognize these situations, and it helps them to it empowers people to do something about it, so that you don't just stand by and do nothing because you don't know what to do, or you freeze because you're completely shocked at what you see or what you hear. So this way you're feeling like, hey, I can actually do something once you've been through that training, and you know that you can do something without escalating the situation. You take responsible actions, and you help somebody instead of remaining passive and even potentially be complicit to the behavior. And of course, what we're talking about here are acts of racism, hateful speech, sometimes bullying, harassment, anti-religion, anti-gender, all those kinds of things where people are against somebody else because they are different or other. So we have done actually several Training Active Bystander workshops in Bridgewater. Proud to say that we've done 3 in this very room. I have to thank the town manager for giving us the space to do this. We've trained 4 of our members to be trainers, so we can actually train people throughout the Southeast region, thanks to funding from Bridgewater State University. And we've done this in collaboration with other organizations within the town. We've actually done trainings in Easton, in Leominster, in Dorchester, in Hingham, Bridgewater, and on Saturday we're doing a training in Falmouth. So it's definitely growing, and people are interested, and they want to see this kind of thing happen in their towns because they hear and see so much behavior that they feel is really inappropriate. So I just want to thank again the council and the town of Bridgewater for their openness to this and to these things, strategies that we're trying to bring about to make this town a safer and more welcoming place to live. Thank you. My husband, Vernon, is going to speak.
My name is Vernon Domingo, 36 Saddle Drive, same as her, for many years. I'm a Bridgewater resident for 33 years now, many of those spent teaching at the university just up the road here. I'm originally from South Africa, as Beryl just said, where the great Nelson Mandela taught us a really important set of lessons about being steadfast against injustice, about how each person taking a stand in small and big ways for social justice can show a humility that is used not to alienate, but to bring people together. My part tonight is to speak about what you've seen on the street corner in downtown Bridgewater on a Saturday morning, and that is the standouts that we do. And we think those are really, really important parts of our activity. The Bridgewater Group, BCCR, stands out in the Bridgewater Common with signs, and you've seen them as you drive by, as you walk by. Our purpose here, and that's really what we want to share with you, why do we do this, is to encourage a community-wide discussion within families and in friendship circles so that we can all strive towards the goals of our better angels, acceptance of people of different races, ethnicities, religions, and different nationalities. Through our standouts, we hope to stimulate a discussion with passing cars and with pedestrians that will continue into their homes, into restaurants, into our community. Our signs sometimes say things like, no place for hate, no to racism, no to anti-Semitism. These are often in response to events in this country and abroad, in the wider world. Our purpose is to show here that this community, our Bridgewater, stands for those higher principles of acceptance, of non-discrimination, and of inclusiveness. Knowing, of course, that we live in a world with people who have varied views of our world, as we well know, our signs always have to say, and they do, things like, have conversations, not confrontations. Or one of our signs says, you can disagree, but disagree agreeably. Or it says, we love this one, always be kind. So from these heavy political issues to practical ways of thinking about our world. We do our standouts respectfully in the hope that the signs that we show will stimulate discussion in this community and in homes. One of the good feelings we have, clearly, is when we hold a sign, for example, that says, and we did recently, no to anti-Semitism, events that happened in our country against people of a Jewish faith. When we hold these signs, no to anti-Semitism, and we see a child, and we have, sitting in the back seat of a car, and the child says, Mom, Dad, what is anti-Semitism? Then we know we are doing our job. We are encouraging conversations at all different levels, and that those discussions will continue into the homes and into the communities as well. So we wanted to give you a sense of why we do that and our message to the larger community about inclusiveness and trying to create that discussion that Bridgewater really needs. Thank you very much.
Just to conclude, first of all, we thank you for this time. But we also have an appeal, and that is to you, that we're trying various things. We're not going away. But if we can work together, if you can give us suggestions as to how you think we can do a better job, perhaps in terms of getting our message out, by all means, give them to us. We want to work together. We want Bridgewater to be a good place. We know some nice things may not be happening all the time, but we can try our best to make Bridgewater a model for communities around us. In fact, just as an aside, the Splendor Group may be forming in East Bridgewater because of our group. So please, if you can help us, we want your input. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for everything that you do. Moving on to the town manager's report under item I, refer to the town manager, Mitchell School update.
Mr. President, Mitchell School planning continues along. The architects and the owner's project manager are meeting with town department heads tomorrow to go over much of the plan and how that will affect their respective departments. They've already met with police department and fire department, so I trust this is another step in the right direction. And that's about all I have on the Mitchell School.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
And we're still on track for the next required submission to the state, and it's still a big game of Mother May I as to when we can take this next step, and then they have to say yes, et cetera, correct?
Correct.
You can't emphasize that enough.
It's a very slow process to some extent, but we're all still on schedule, marching towards the same dates that we've talked about.
Thank you.
Okay, items for the next meeting, which is February 4th. No. What?
Oh, God, no.
Not February 4th, it's too, that's, do you have a question?
January 21?
January 21st is our next meeting, so if anybody has any items they want
I have
the
one.
town manager to address, you can bring it up now. Yeah, or
Update on skips, and I'd like that to be a standing item as well, because this cannot go away.
update on skips.
Can we get an update on the McElwain School?
And Mike, I'm going to put on something for January 25th, and that's the paid parking program, my favorite. It's been a year, and I want to know how it's going. Revenue, expenses, plan, everything, and I'll touch base with you between now and then as far as exactly what I'm looking for, but I just want to put it on there, the paid parking program that went into effect a year ago. I want to know how it's going. Anybody else? If you don't have anything tonight and you have something between now and before the next agenda comes out, please reach out to Ann and have her put it on the agenda. We did that one. Committee reports. Are there any committees here tonight that wish to give a report on their activities? Bill? No? Just- we missed this. Okay, moving on. Legislation for action. There is none. Old business. There is none. New business. Under NA, Order FY 20-044, acceptance of non-recurring revenue to the capital. This is presented by the town manager.
Motion to refer to the Budget and Finance committees.
Second.
There's a motion and there's a second to refer it out to committee. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's been referred out. Resolution FY 20-007, amend September 20th Town Council meeting date. That's something I put in as from understanding that the state primary will be held September 1st. And we had initially scheduled a council meeting for September 1st. And evidently, we can't do that if there's a state primary. The town offices should not be having public meetings in the evenings. Town offices will be open, don't get me wrong, but public meetings should not be held during that. So
I'd suggest we just keep it here as a first reading and
oh, that's right.
do it
Can't do
next
anything
meeting.
tonight. So I assume we'll move it to the next week, but we'll talk about that next meeting.
Well, we keep this here as a first reading, I think.
We just keep it, we'll put it
Shouldn't
back
have a
on
problem.
for items for action for next meeting. Resolution FY 20-008, East Street traffic. I have asked and have been in contact with the Councilor George from District 3 about East Street. And I put this forward to refer it out to the Public Safety Committee to take a look at there's been some incidents on East Street that have affected some families. There's been some banter on social media about the flow of traffic, speed, trucks on East Street, and other incidents. So I think it's important that we try to refer this out to take a look at East Street itself and what can be done to make it safer or put additional safeguards in place. So I would,
Motion to refer to the Public Safety Committee.
Second.
there's a motion to refer to public safety, and there's a second. Any discussion,
Can
Councilor?
we hire a consultant?
That would be up to them. If they need one, they can request one. Mr. George, did you have a
Yeah, so just to kind of expand on that, excuse me. not only is this to look specifically at East Street, but I've been getting a lot of emails regarding just overall traffic flow, at least in my precinct, if not in other areas. And I did have a nice meeting with Mr. Dutton, and one of the things that I would hope that we could start to do is kind of adopt what West Bridgewater has done for texting. For people that have seen the social media and the coverage of West Bridgewater being overt about fighting texting and driving, I'll be honest, when I'm going in that direction, that phone is flipped over, my hands are on the wheels, and I'm making sure that I am not touching that phone, because they have done, at least in my estimation, an excellent PR job of putting people on notice that they are going to be overt about that. I would love to see Bridgewater take the same approach to speeding and starting to be overt about enforcing the speed. We had a long discussion about engine braking. Well, I think it was Harry Bailey who got up and said, if the trucks aren't speeding, they don't need to engine brake. Maybe we address some of those issues by just being overt about that. And I understand it becomes a resource issue with the police chief and things of that nature, but I think if we can be overt about it for an extended period of time, that we can see dividends across the board. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? There's a motion, there's a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of referring it to public safety? Aye. Opposed? Okay, refer it out. Citizens' comments. Are there any citizens here that wish to speak during the citizens' comments portion of our meeting? Anybody?
I feel like Keith Buell bookending the meetings with comments. Bill Wood, 388 Hayward Street. I kept my comments earlier short so we could move on to other pieces. I had two other items I want to cover. One of the first pieces of legislation that I had ever put in as a counselor was to get the crosswalks downtown striped. And that was an important change in the safety for the downtown crosswalks between the east side and the west side and the common. This weekend, as part of the Lions Club, we took down the decorations. And when we do that, there's garland on the light posts and you have stuff to move across the street. And so there were quite a few times that the Lions had to cross the street. And there was one time, one of our newest Lions, but she's not new to Bridgewater, was crossing the street, and I think she had to wait about 90 seconds in the crosswalk, stepping closer and closer to the center of the street. She finally stepped in front of a truck before it stopped. Now, we've talked about this before, or the council has talked about this before, and on Plymouth Street, there's flashing lights for the pedestrians to use, the students, when crossing Plymouth Street. And when you look at the common and look at the angle of the crosswalks, one of the items in the report that I referenced earlier is to change the angle of the crosswalks and do some other things. And it's a really simple process to take the center of the common, where you don't have the end caps and you don't have a lot of traffic changing direction, but the dead center of the common, and to put these pedestrian flashers in. So what I did earlier today was I wrote some basic framework language, and I sent it off to my two representatives, the at-large counselors, and I'm hoping that the council at some point in the near future will take action on that, because although that's not a remarkable and large change, I think it would aid in the safety of people crossing the street there, especially at night when you can't see anybody crossing the street. And this was broad daylight, 9 o'clock in the morning, easy to see a person, and she could not cross the street without stepping in front of that truck. So that's the first item. The last item is I attended a CPC meeting a couple weeks ago as part of another piece, and I stayed through the whole meeting. Now, I don't know what the current status is, but at that meeting, the architects had been in to talk about the War Memorial Building over here. And they presented a plan where they were going to put bathroom kiosks in the center of the room. So this discussion point isn't really about the bathroom kiosks in the center of the room, which is, to me, a ridiculous idea, because who the heck wants to flush the toilet in the middle of the room, right? But it's that the council needs to keep an eye on these things as they progress, because as far as I know, the town manager already has $700,000 in his not his pocket, but but in his use, that he can go forward and make changes to that building, including putting bathrooms in the center of the room. I hope that doesn't happen, but I'm just saying that be active participants in all the action around our empty buildings, our municipal buildings, as we were in the past, and that's it. Thank you.
Are there any other citizens here that wish to speak during the citizens' open portion of our meeting? Citizens' comments. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll move on to council comments. I'll start with Councilor Fitzgibbons.
Happy New Year, everybody. And in the spirit of what BCCR came in and talked about, I'd like to thank all my fellow councilors. I know we don't always agree on everything all the time, which is great. That's why there's 9 of us in the charter, because we all bring our own opinions to the table. But I've never felt like just because we disagree, you felt I was a bad person, or I certainly hope you don't feel like I felt you were a bad person, because you're not. It just means we disagree on an issue. And if we can model that for, the people watching, people in town, our children, et cetera, I think that's a very important and powerful thing to do. So thank you.
Mr. Columbotus?
Just Happy New Year. That's it.
That's it. Loesch?
Yes, Happy New Year, and I wanted to thank BCCR for coming in for the presentation. This past Saturday, I went to a store, and there was a white nationalist recruitment sticker on the sign that I parked in front of, and I saw it, and I said something, which is what an active bystander should do. So I implore those to keep your eyes open and to feel, empowered to take steps, because those little steps make a difference, and hopefully the next person that parks there won't be accosted by such things. But it's very important, and I'm happy to see that you're having impacts on other towns and other people. So thank you for all that work. And I know we're paying you tons of money to do it, but it's very important, and it's very...
Times when the council gets paid.
I know. It's very important and very vital in these times, so I thank you.
So I just had 2 quick mentions, both related to the fire department. The first one was just sort of a shout out to the fire department over the winter break since the last time we met. Actually assisted in or delivered 4 babies in town, which is just a remarkable thing. And Paul Lamoureux, Captain Paul Lamoureux, retired. He had a retirement sort of going away at the fire department on Monday after 35 years of service to the town. So just wanted to thank him on behalf of the council for his years of service and wish him best of luck in retirement.
Mr. George?
Happy New Year to everyone, and I just wanted to mention that myself, Councilor Gallagher, Councilor Fitzgibbons we were able to attend the Eagle Scout project presentation for the new sign at the VFW. It was a great crowd there, and he did a fantastic job. So one of the pleasures of being able to participate in something like that. So thank you.
Mr. Chase?
Thank you. I'll say Happy New Year as well. But I thought it was very important for us to hear tonight the comments from FinCom, from the school committee. I think that at each discussion that every year that we have in terms of kind of hashing out the school budget for the year, I learned something new, and I certainly feel I did tonight. And I think it's very important for us to continue to maintain the kind of dialogue that we do here in the context of the annual school budget. Otherwise, I was very impressed this evening by the presence and the comments from the Citizens for Civility and Respect. I thought that was a very compelling presentation. Certainly, I think many people in town are familiar with the organization, but to hear more about the real extent of their activity, I thought was truly impressive, and I congratulate them on all their efforts to this point. I know they'll be very vigorous in continuing them going forward.
Mr. Souza?
So I would like to wish everyone a Happy New Year. Excuse me. Back to those signs out here, stop signs, I think they're called. There was a safety meeting that they were talking about putting flashing lights around them that other towns have at different locations. And I'd like to see a follow-up on that, because I think anything that can draw attention to those signs. So I'd like to feel that my original presentation is what got them there, and I'd like to continue forcing something on it. Now, someone asked me about enforcing it, and I talked to the town manager. Of course, what we realized is, just look outside. Where would an officer be in a vehicle during the day with all shortage of parking on the streets anyway, okay? But they are doing some enforcement. I see them parking in the parking spaces over there in the evening after a lot of the businesses are closed. But we still have to do a lot more to make walking around this common a little safer. I don't expect to get it completely cured in a month or so, but I'm afraid we're going to see someone get hit. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think this was a very good and productive meeting tonight. I think we set the tone for the year with understanding that we're heading into a budget cycle, with all that's going on in the world, with trying to respect one another this year. We have a lot to do over the next several months, and this is going to be a very busy year. And I think that the issues and topics that were discussed tonight, I think, have set the tone. So we'll get through it. We do not have an executive session this evening. And our next meeting is not until January 21st, 2020. We'll see you in 2 weeks. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned.